Werewolf here. Once I worked as a tax preparer. One afternoon at the office, on a slow day, I looked up on the internet the original federal tax income form from 1913, the one that was the beginning of the current system that we have today. Back then, it was only 3 pages long they had to fill out, and 1 page of instructions. When I took the class to become a tax preparer, for the basic income tax preparation, my textbook was well over 400 pages, and that didn't even cover everything that I had to know for the job. And since then, I often thought about what I would do if I was in government and what changes I would make. I recall a time that an old lady called the office. She explained that she hadn't worked in years, she was receiving Social Security payments, and wanted to know if she had to come in to file her taxes or not. She was hard of hearing, and ideally, the explanation would have been a simple yes or no. But unfortunately, the way the IRS says it is, if 1/2 of your Social Security payment, when added to any other income, passive or active, is more than the threshold amount, it's a different amount, changes maybe every year, every couple of years, then some of that payment may be subject to tax. So one of the first things I would do is eliminate any taxes like that are difficult to explain over the phone. Also, too, when you think about it, that Social Security money is from money collected in taxes, and then we're using tax revenue to pay IRS agents to process her return, to do any investigations and audits. It would just be simpler just not to tax Social Security or any government handouts. In some cases, unemployment payments are taxed, just at all, and just save the money from the operating budget. I also learned that our government is no friend of small businesses when it comes to taxes. Why, even a hobbyist that makes over, the amount changes, so look it up, I think at one point it's $400, selling stuff on eBay, or someone that does contract work that maybe never thought of themselves as a small business owner, well, they're taxed the same way as a small business owner, so they have to file more forms. Companies, web services usually charge more for that. Look, if I was a governor or a president, I would want to be as friendly to small business owners as I could, because even someone hiring a few people from a business in their garage, look, I could say those jobs were created under my administration. Other things that are just confusing, if you're a landscaper or a photographer, maybe instead of a W-2 explaining all of your payments at the end of the year, you receive a 1099. Well, just to be confusing, the government has over 30 different kinds of 1099s, many of which have nothing in common with the other. I don't know where they come up with these numbers. Now, why can't it just be Form 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A lot of people are not taught in the school system about the 401k retirement fund, and I saw a lot of, especially young people, that didn't know what it was, so maybe they're changing jobs and they cashed it out, and instead of getting money back, they owed money because they had all these taxes that are designed to punish you for taking money out. Another thing I found out was most of what I see published online and in the news is almost true about taxes, but they usually didn't understand one little detail that completely changes the context. See, when I see a leftist post tax the rich, well, the working rich, say a doctor or lawyer, they actually pay a lot of their income in taxes, and they have the fewest of any write-offs. Well, someone like Jeff Bezos, for instance, has so many avenues where he can move his money around through the year that he can really avoid a lot of the taxes or defer them. Meanwhile, for the rest of us, the IRS has to scrutinize every little transaction we make. And I can't help but wonder if this was the original surveillance state. Well, someone on the right saying the poor don't pay any taxes. Well, again, sometimes and sometimes they do. A self-employed, lower-income person pays a lot in taxes. They probably have the fewest possible deductions. Working poor, it can vary widely. So I think that the politicians on both sides are just handed scripts by their advisors. But if any one of them sat down and actually did their taxes long form, by hand, by paper, they would notice all sorts of things they could talk about in their speeches and their policies. Well, there's even an AOC tax credit. Like, Ocasio-Cortez could talk about that in her speeches. But most politicians don't actually know this. They're just told what the big picture is. And the big picture doesn't always tell. Other things that are confusing. One of the mailing addresses for the IRS to send forms into is located in Kansas City, Missouri. It's almost as if they want to keep this whole process confusing as possible by choosing a city with the name of a completely different state. Kansas City, Kansas State. Here in New York, we even have a page on the State Department of Taxation website explaining the haunted house tax. Well, amusement park haunted house taxes. You see, there's a guy that owned an amusement park haunted house, and he thought that he didn't have to pay sales tax, and then one year he got this massive bill for all these back tax payments that was supposed to have charged customers. I'm not giving any tax advice by any means. Talk to professionals working in the field is your best bet, but here are just a few general tips that I learned that I didn't know about before I started the job. If you do any kind of small business or just selling stuff on eBay, keep a journal. Anything that you think you might be able to deduct or have any questions about, even mileage, where you went, and stuff like that. If they ask about the car, make, and model, miles at the beginning of the year. In some cases, the IRS actually takes that as enough proof for deduction. I never would take out a cash card personally that they can put your refund on, that some tax services offer. If you do, good questions to ask are, what ATMs in my area accept this? And what happens if the cash card goes offline? You see, there are a couple times where the cash card was run by an outside company that wasn't the office that I worked at. It wasn't the company I worked for. And there are a couple of times, I remember on Saturdays, it would go offline, and we'd get these irate, upset, distressed calls from customers like, I'm in Target or I'm in Walmart in line and the car's not working, all these people behind me and everyone's mad at me. And I genuinely wish I could help those people out. The only thing I knew how to do, was instructed to do, and was allowed to do was give them the 1-800 number for the card. And of course, they were on hold for 40 minutes or so, and I have no idea if the people at the other end of the line were helpful or not. But you know what? I'm actually less afraid of the IRS. It's unlikely they're going to send agents to your door. Look, if you commit an honest error in good faith because you thought you understood it, they usually send you a confusingly worded letter. You can go to any tax office off-season especially and ask them to help them interpret it for you. They might not charge you for that. And if it's your first year owing a ton of money, if you send in any amount postmarked, if it gets there by April 15th, there's a form that the IRS has where you can request an installment payment. And from what I've heard from people I know, it generally works out for them. Again, nothing I say is of guarantee by any means. And what I liked most about the job, one of the few things I liked about the job was I feel like a tax return tells you the story of a year of a person's life. Sometimes I learned interesting things about people from small talk or questions that were raised about the form, and so yeah, it really is the story of the human condition. That's one of the few good things I have to say about the whole process. Well, hey, thank you for watching my channel. Subscribe, and until next time, life, liberty, and the pursuit of...